Good to have everyone joining us today. We're going to be going over some important news focused on the analytics and business intelligence space, principally insofar as that can help small businesses. One of the things that I think is certainly critical in the last couple of years has been the rise of business intelligence as something that very large organizations can take advantage of. And while useful to organizations that have 10 or 20,000 people, what has been less heralded has been the ability for smaller organizations to take advantage of that same increase in computing power and increase in driving business intelligence versus even as recently as 2 to 3 years ago. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to walk through some of the new features and functionality that Microsoft in particular has developed over the past year and a half to help organizations like yours take advantage of these business intelligence features to be able to provide solid improvements to your bottom line. These are not aspirational or pie-in-the-sky goals. What we're going to be going over are easy ways for you to take advantage of services that are out there already to help your business. As part of that, I think it's illustrative to talk about what the total opportunity is that we're looking at. On the worldwide level, there's approximately $1.6 trillion in value that organizations are achieving through investments in data and business analytics. That's in comparison to companies that don't have that capability. So it's not that there's $1.6 trillion just sloshing around. Realistically, the companies that get this are going to get some of that pie. The companies that are not on board with business intelligence are going to miss out. Even as recently as within this year, actually the source that we're using this for is from April, after surveying 2,000 different companies, there were a couple of key insights that really emerged from that survey. The first is that organizations that are taking advantage of this are doing so by collecting a wide array of data. So I know that there's a lot of hype in the media right now around the concept of big data, whether you're a Netflix or an Amazon. And certainly those organizations are taking advantage of those data sets. But expanding what you think of as data that you're collecting to other, even more mundane types of data can certainly assist your organization. I chatted with a company the other day who was mostly involved with logistics. They were going around and delivering products to individual consumers' houses on a regular basis. One of the data sets that they had never taken advantage of was that they were actually collecting data on driver routes. So every time that a driver drove a truck from point A to point B, even though it was the same route more or less week to week or month to month, with the addition of 10 or 15 different customers, those routes had very rarely ever changed. And as an aggregate, when you looked across the entire organization and the entire geographic footprint that they used, even though they were collecting the data on how long it was taking for those routes to take place, they had never really analyzed it before. So being sure that you're capturing a diverse set of data, not just the data that's living right now in a database that you know about, but every single data source that you have access to, whether that's data that's being collected by devices or people in the field, whether that's social data through things like Facebook or Exchange or Yammer, you name it. If there's a data source that's out there, the more progressive companies tend to be collecting it. The second capability that really separates the more forward-leaning organizations from the ones who aren't getting some of this money is the ability to use new analytical capabilities. And that's really the heart of what we're going to discuss today, because in the past, the ability to consume that data was a big problem, but also the ability to analyze it on a repeatable basis. You might have 3, 4, even 10 people who are business analysts, and all they're doing is transforming and cleaning up and processing these data sets. It's a very, I would say, frustrating and non-enjoyable task to perform, but you needed those people because a lot of the data sets that you were connecting to were very messy. and it was difficult to get your insights without first doing all that cleanup, and you had to do that cleanup on a regular basis. So being able to automate that to some degree and use the new analytical capabilities of the platform are critical to those organizations that are trying to take advantage of the being the first mover in this space. And finally, the final differentiator between the companies that get it and the companies that don't is that rather than having a small subset of people who had access to this information, they tried to democratize that data across the organization. I'll use the driver mentality again. If only one or two people in the organization were aware that some routes were more profitable than others, then that's not going to really spur a change organization-wide for how that's thought of. But if every single person, from the CEO down the person driving the truck, was aware of that data, it suddenly becomes a different matter. Because then you have people who are saying, well, I want to make my particular geographic patch more profitable. What mechanisms can I use to do that? Or I want to be able to make my business unit more efficient at what they're doing. Maybe the data sources that I'm looking at aren't even data sources inside my environment. Maybe I'm looking at publicly held data, things in databases that everyone has access to, but I'm the first person to get to it and have the tools to work on it. And what we've seen is if you silo those data tools to a small subset of analysts, to 4 or 5 or 10 people rather than the entire organization, you miss out on a lot of innovation that other people in the organization could be taking advantage of. So what is the Microsoft approach from a BI perspective? Well, they want to be able to provide an end-to-end data platform for every single type of data and every single person in an organization. So first, we're going to take a look at how you collect and manage all the data coming into the business. That can be a lot of stuff that's structured or unstructured. It can be data in the form of videos or items on the web. There needs to be a way that you can store that data in one location and prepare it to be consumed. Once you've got that data collected and managed, a lot of the organizations we work with, especially the ones that are smaller, that first step of collecting all the data, that's seen as the biggest lift because it's just historically never been done. But once you've got all that data in one place, the next question is, how do you make it useful to everyone in the organization? The fact that you've got some sort of repository for every type of data that you deal with is great. But if people can't consume that easily, if people can't really transform it and help you analyze the data, it's not going to be of use to the organization. That's typically where we see organizations reach I would say a point filled with some friction, is the collection process. It's easy to know when it begins and when it ends because you say, oh, I'm complete. I had 5 databases. Now they're in one centralized location. Great. But after you've got those centralized, the ability to surface that information to everyone, that's a bigger lift and one that there may not be an apparent beginning and end to. But finally, once you've got that data transformed and once you've done some rough analysis of it, you really need to make sure everyone can consume it. And this doesn't mean that every member of your organization needs to be a whiz kid when it comes to Excel and when it comes to business intelligence. A lot of the stakeholders who want to be able to make those informed decisions just need to see it in an easy to consume manner, especially in the C-suite. If you're looking at a small organization, a lot of individuals don't have time to be spending 2 or 3 hours massaging data in Excel to reach a conclusion. They want to have that data presented to them quickly based on a couple of key questions that they put together. All along this path, Microsoft and New Signature can help move your organization. So when we look at it, let's talk about that visualization perspective. Once you've gotten everything together and you're able to discover and explore and combine different parts of data, regardless of where you are, to be able to make forecasts through natural language questions and to be able to share those insights on any device, that's really the holy grail. And that's where we're trying to get, is to that area where you can say every single person can consume this. Every single person who has Excel can access the data sources and can be doing some of that analysis. Every single person who has access to a web browser can go into the Power BI sites to look at those insights and ask questions through things like natural language query. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is what that roughly looks like. When I think about the solution all up, I tend to break it down into two areas, because one is certainly more of a constructive area and one is more of a consumption-based area. So you'll still continue to have individuals who do business analysis. Simply tapping into the data doesn't mean that it's instantly going to light up with the conclusions for your business. If it did, everyone would be doing this because it would be obvious. Now, I can certainly say that large numbers of people, Excel is the number one business intelligence solution in the market today. And even a lot of the more, I would say, expensive solutions out there to do business intelligence, frequently many of the competitors in the space, if I'm selling a $2,000 or $3,000 a month product, even at that level, a lot of times the analysis is still exported into Excel so that other people can contribute to it and so that other people can understand it. And what Microsoft realized was that if everyone is doing this work in Excel at all stages of complexity, why not just bake that functionality into Excel itself? So I would say the most critical takeaway, if you take nothing else from this webinar, it's that if you already own Excel 2013, you've already got that software platform, it's already built to deliver a huge amount of value. We'll dive into in a minute what those individual capabilities are, things like Power Query or Power View or Power Map. But what's important to note is all of those solutions simply light up. They're baked into the cost of Excel itself. So if you're using Excel today and you're not using those features, you're really not taking advantage of the very powerful business intelligence components that are baked into the product. It's great to do that discovery, to build up that traditional business analyst perspective, and to come up with some slick looking visualizations. But even after you've done all of that, ultimately you're going to want to share those conclusions with other members of your team. And that's where Power BI Sites for Office 365 dramatically simplifies and reduces the amount of time it takes to be able to have an enterprise-wide business intelligence platform. I've talked to so many customers and even been in meetings with customers where I've said, hey, let me see your business intelligence. Let me see the metrics, the KPIs, how you're running your organization. And many of them say, oh, of course, we have that in Excel. Let me go ahead and connect to that particular Excel sheet. And what follows therein is someone, opening up a remote desktop session or tracking down where that Excel file is, or instant messaging the CFO of the organization, all to be able to find the specific Excel worksheet that has the data that they want to present. And when that data is unavailable, when the worksheet is locked by another person, or for whatever reason the latest version has not been updated on the file share or wherever it's stored, that can mean that no one has access to the data. That's a huge problem. And a lot of organizations get around this by saying that IT needs to really own it 100%. But the flip side is, if I want to ask a quick question of the data that I already have, whether that's just a question like, how much profit did we make last month? Or what are the coming forecasts for our sales team? I should be able to do that without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. And Power BI for Office 365 lights that up. It's a single site built on top of SharePoint to be able to surface the information that I need as a consumer of that data to very easily see. As a data steward, you can certainly promote particular worksheets within it. You can promote questions that people ask. But even if it's a question that I have on my own that's not a popular question, I can still ask it myself. I can still upload an Excel sheet to that data and know that the right people with the right security can be able to access it. And finally, they can access it on a variety of different devices. It's not just something that only lights up for people with a specific software package. Instead, anyone with a web browser or a mobile device can get access to it. So I'm going to dive into the actual components of what these two different sides of the stack look like. I'll mention again, the most important takeaway is that if you're using Excel 2013 today, you already have the ability to consume a lot of the services that we're going to go over. If we have enough time at the end, I'll also show off a demo of this so you can see what it looks like in real life to be able to make that call for yourself. So we'll start with the Excel story. There are a couple of different tools that are now part of the Excel package that allow you to consume data that previously you would not be able to do. The first major component is what's known as Power Query. Power Query hooks into Excel and allows you to reach out to a huge variety of different data sources. I think many of us think of data as a source living inside a database that's running off of some server sitting inside our corporate network. And it can certainly do that. It can connect to some SQL server running inside your environment. But it can do much, much more. It can connect to other types of internal data sources, things like Active Directory or Exchange. It can connect to alternate vendors' platforms, things like IBM's DB2 or MySQL. It can connect into those. It can also connect to items that we don't traditionally think of as being a relational database source, something like Facebook. Or even CRM. It can go out, hook into that system, and pull the data down via an OData feed. Finally, in addition to being able to do all of that, as well as more advanced features like Hadoop, it can also search the public internet. And this is probably the biggest, I would say, win for small businesses, in that you may not have large amounts of data already in relational databases within your environment. But every one of us on a regular basis is going out and looking for information that's already publicly available that we could consume. The best part of Power Query is not only does it let you access those public data sources, it allows you to apply repeatable mechanisms to the data source to clean it up. I mentioned earlier that a large number of people at big organizations spend time cleaning up data every single day. If you spend more than 6 hours a day in Excel, you're probably one of these individuals. And certainly those people get very good at what they do, but a lot of what they do is repeatable and can be automated. And in the past, that may have required a very expensive software package. Now that can be done within Excel itself. I can go through, grab a data source that changes. Wikipedia is probably the best example of this. Many of us would trust Wikipedia for a spot check to say, oh, I'm going to look at this. The example we have here is the list of S&P 500 companies. Well, that's true for today, let's say. And I would be able to go out there and get that information and use it. But what happens a week from now, or a month from now, or 6 months from now when that list changes? I have no idea. Is the format going to stay the same? Is it going to be slightly altered? The big benefit of using Power Query is you can automate and clean up that data to take it from something that seems unstructured. It looks like it's in a table, but there may be some formatting changes. There may be some capitalization or some object types that you need to switch. You can apply repeatable rules to that source of information so that when those changes take place on the back end, all I have to do is click refresh. It will go out to the public information source. It'll grab that data. It'll apply the exact same cleanup policies I did the first time, and it will present the updated data to me. So it has the capability of saving hundreds of hours for individuals who are refreshing data in that manner. All of the data that Power Query is pulling into itself go into what's known as Power Pivot. And this is probably the biggest technical increase in Excel's capabilities. In the past, Excel was limited to a much smaller number of rows of data. With Power Pivot, it's as if someone dropped a tiny SQL database inside Excel itself to give you lightning fast analytics and computations on the actual data that you're pulling. This extends beyond one data source. So you could link up two public data sources and a private data source. You could have 3 different types of private data sources all held together by a single identity key. Regardless of how you model it, all of that can be done on the back end, again, to save you time so that instead of having to use additional tool sets, you can live where most business intelligence users live, within Excel itself. Once you've built up a model, and that doesn't have to be that complex, and you consume the data, the next item is how you're actually going to deliver insights. And this is probably, I would say, one of the most challenging parts of business intelligence, which is that simply gathering up all the data into one table doesn't instinctively provide you with business insights. You need to have some sort of visualization. Now, that could be starting with a table or starting with a chart and having a business analyst look at it and see, oh, I see that the numbers are going up. Let me try and come up with a more compelling visualization of this. You don't have to, be Edward Tufte to build a nice visualization based on the data you have. You just have to make sure that it's easy enough and clear and clean enough that individuals can see what they're trying to do. And the biggest benefit of using Power View, again, another tool within Excel itself, is that it's very easy to build these compelling visualizations without having to become an Excel master. I don't have to learn every single component of Power Pivot to be able to generate a quick chart or a quick pie chart to be able to show off what I'm trying to do. Frequently, what I'll find customers doing is using Power View to build up a bunch of different maps of the data that they have. Once they have those data visualizations, that's in turn what drives the insights. It's very infrequently the other way around, that someone could simply look at a table of data and as if by magic say, oh, I see what we need, our business is going to crater in the fourth quarter. Instead, they're often building these visualizations, and that's what's providing them with the business insights. So if you don't have these sorts of dashboards in your environment, that's going to be a key win for you right out of the box. Again, included in the cost of Excel Pro Plus 2013. The final component, that's the newest component, is that if you have data that's geographical, there's a new component called Power Map that can work to show off what those insights are in real time and actually over a time scenario. So you can actually develop interactive videos to be able to show off, here's what the conclusions are. It doesn't have to be something that's a countrywide to provide analysis. It doesn't even have to be on a globe. It could be a map of zip codes. It could be a map of routes that drivers have driven. It could be a list of buildings or potential areas that you want to expand your business. All of those are valid things that the geography-based analysis is going to provide a little bit of additional heft to being able to generate that visualization. If you don't have geographical data, certainly this isn't going to be your cup of tea, but what I found when I've chatted with customers is a lot of organizations have geographical data in some respect, they're just not using it right now. So even if you're a small business and you only have 50 people working for you, look at your customers. Say, hey, where are my customers coming from? Where are my customers looking to, obtain new services? Maybe if they're not looking at me specifically, maybe they're also looking at competitors. And those competitors have a geographic component to them. Maybe I can map those out. So there are lots of different ways to build up that visualization for customers and yourself to take advantage of. So the flip side of the coin is, of course, the Power BI side of the coin. What does that look like? Well, it's composed of a number of different aspects, but the key difference is that the Excel services can be turned on and lit up today inside Excel. With Power BI, you're going to want to go out and procure what's known as a Power BI site for Office 365. So it's using the power of Excel and Office 365 to provide you data discovery, analysis, and visualizations from that data that you already have in Excel. It lets you collaborate more efficiently, and it really reduces the barriers towards deployment of a full business intelligence environment for sharing reports and accessing information. We have a lot of customers who have this image of business intelligence being a series of large servers that they have to purchase, and a database administrator who has to run them and back them up and keep them clean. All of that is done on the back end with Power BI for Office 365. So realistically, all you're doing is sharing and collaborating as an organization on the platform. Specifically, what does that look like? Well, there are a couple of different areas. The first area, and the one that you'll see when we dive into the demonstration, is the ability to quickly create a collaborative site. If you're used to working with Office 365 or SharePoint, this will look relatively familiar to you. It contains a number of reports and featured questions and documents that every single member of your organization can upload to one single location. So as I said in the introduction, the days of having multiple people go to a file share or hop onto someone's desktop or connect to another machine to be able to get the Excel workbook that has the critical information, none of that needs to take place once you have a Power BI site. You can load very large workbooks up into the Power BI site and then allow people to view and interact with them so that they can actually look at the data as it's coming in, rather than having to do this awkward hopping around to find where the Excel sheets are. By having one centralized location, it also ensures that all of your data can be stored in one site and then searched across the entire organization with one site as well. All of the Power BI sites include a component known as the Data Gateway that can connect to any existing databases that you have inside your organization. So it's not just people uploading Excel documents into here and being able to get intelligence from that. You can also connect it directly into your data sources, whether that's a SQL server or a MySQL server or a DB2 database. So if you've got existing data sources, you can hook that in as well to be able to surface that information. Once you've got all of that data surfaced on one site, that's when you can start to take advantage of the advanced features. So things like queries for the team. In addition to sharing a workbook, you can actually share what that query is so that people can be able to build the information out as needed. Frequently, we work with organizations where some members of the executive team will know some bits of information about the business and some will know others. The head of HR might know the recent number of people that they have acquired and the cost of those acquisitions. The CFO might know the total amount being spent and left over in collections. The chief operating officer might know the burn rate for existing projects that are coming in. By having shared queries, you can actually share that query across all the different individuals who need access to it. So instead of needing to know specifically, hey, what type of information do I need to search on, you can simply publish that information to what's known as a data catalog. The big benefit of that then is, even if you don't happen to be the person who knows that query by heart, I can simply in Excel choose to go and select the data catalog and see, here are the popular queries that are either useful to my organization all up, or useful to me on the executive team, or useful to me in my role. So being able to do that is critical to reducing the amount of time that people spend. Think in your own organization today, how much time do people spend hunting, not for the data, they know the data is in the system, but for the question that will light up what they need to know in that actual data. I mentioned earlier that you can hook in the data management gateway into your own environment. As soon as you do that, it will refresh that data on a regular basis to ensure that workbooks and reports that are built upon that data have the ability to have consistently fresh data. You, of course, within your organization, your IT team can completely control what data sources that data management gateway has access to. It can control who has rights to those different data sources. All of that can be configured to be able to leverage the solution. And the biggest benefit that we've seen with the data management gateway is that once you've surfaced it all in Power BI, I'm not spending time on my own personal machine inside the office trying to get access to some SQL server. Instead, I'm just connecting to my internet-facing Power BI site. It's locked down from a security perspective, so only I can access the reports that I need. But it ensures that I'm not having to hunt around for some IT person to get me the database access that I need to be able to do my job. That data catalog that I mentioned earlier is surfaced within Excel itself. So I don't even have to go up to a Office 365 Power BI site to be able to take advantage of the fact that data is being stored there. As long as I connect into my own data catalog, I can see all of the information that's been published to me. That could be information that I generated from myself. It could be information that's publicly held. Let's imagine that a particular article on the World Bank site or the CIA site or the Wikipedia site, whatever data source you want to use, if it's something that you're regularly accessing and you want other members of your organization to be able to take advantage of, if it's something off the World Factbook, let's say, you can certainly publish that into your organization's data catalog, and then everyone who keeps asking you, hey, how did you get those numbers so quickly, can get it from you immediately. It's important to note that you'll always have the ability to get mobile access to the Power BI sites. Microsoft has spent a lot of time rebuilding a lot of the Excel experience to render in HTML5, so that if you're on any HTML5 compatible browser on any device, whether it's Safari or Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, you name it, as long as it's HTML5 compatible, you'll be able to connect in and get access to those reports. There's also a native mobile business intelligence app that runs on Windows 8.1 right now, as well as iOS later this year. So if you want to be able to consume that from an app perspective, you'll also be able to do that. The final component, and I think one of the most important components of the Office 365 Power BI story, is that in addition to being able to get access to this data, the one thing that you can't do, and by can't I mean it's just prohibitively expensive to do, is to be able to use natural language search with your own internal environment. There's just not a good component that allows this to light up. But because Power BI has the power of Microsoft's cloud on the back end, it will take all of your data that you have access to, and it will be able to index that data and allow you to very easily search for the data that you need in your language of choice and make suggestions for you. This seems kind of like a no-brainer, but when I also often walk to my CFO, the question that I ask of him is a fairly simple question. It's, what's our profit for this month, or what did sales look like last month? Those sorts of questions are very easy to write down, and yet that's not the sort of format that a traditional SQL query would be written in. With a natural language query, I can actually type that into my Power BI site directly, and as long as I have access to the underlying data, it will look through all the different types of data that I have. It will make a judgment call. It will say, Reed's asking for profit based on the last 2 months. That's typically contained within this one worksheet that he has access to. It's not typically contained in these other databases or other worksheets. So I'm going to pull the information from this one worksheet and give him a result. The best part of natural language query is not only is it quick, but it allows me on my side to very quickly reformat or adjust the presentation and the visualization so that I can get my question answered more quickly. In the past, I might have to go to a team of individuals, to 3 or 4 business analysts, and say, hey, I'd like to see our overall profit per quarter over the last 8 quarters, and I want you to carve that out by business line. That question is something that implies that they need to make a judgment call of what type of visualization would be the best for showing that data. The best part of natural language query is it makes that judgment call for you. It's going to suggest, I'm going to build a bar chart for you, or this information that you asked contains geographical data, so I'm going to show you a map. Or maybe it goes best in a line chart. By looking at the type of data that's surfaced there, natural language query will make an assumption about what you need. Now, you always have the ability to go back and say, oh, you gave me a line chart, but I really wanted to see a bar chart, and you can flip it up. So it's not preventing you from looking at another format. It's just making it quicker for you to be able to get those rich insights. So now that we know what it's capable of doing, and I certainly agree with Lowell here that being able to leverage BI on top of 365 is critical, because even though almost everyone has Excel, by giving everyone incredibly rich business intelligence on top of Excel, it really lets every member of your organization be able to generate those insights. Let's look at what that looks like in the form of a demo. Let me go ahead and flip over to my demo screen. So we're going to start with where I typically start, namely Excel. So let me go ahead and bring in a new Excel workbook and light that up so everyone can see what that looks like. So I've got here a typical Excel instance running. And as you can see, even though Excel is lit up with the features like Power Query and Power Map and Power View, it doesn't look materially different than it normally would. So there's not a huge difference in terms of the user interface or experience. If I want to take advantage of some of these new features, I can simply go up to the Power Query tab and begin to get data from my organization. I mentioned that being able to leverage this as part of Excel, included in the cost of Excel Pro Plus 2013, that's a huge benefit. You should definitely take that away as one of the most important benefits. The second big benefit that I would highlight is that it's incredibly easy using just the Power Query plugin to be able to grab data from a variety of sources. So right here, I'm already signed into Power Query as my organization account. So if I were to go back, I could actually see what types of queries I've had in the past. But over here are the things that are going to allow me to grab data from my environment and from public environments. Got the ability to pull from a specific web page if I visit a web page and see that it's got some data. I've also got the ability to pull from a traditional file, so I can pull a traditional Excel sheet or a CSV or even an XML. I could also grab information from a folder. Then I've got my traditional databases. I've got SQL Server, Azure SQL, Access, and even competitors like Oracle or IBM DB2 or MySQL. All of these are different databases that I can pull information into Power Query. When you think about the types of data sources that aren't traditional, this is where Power Query goes above and beyond. So I can pull from a SharePoint list, I can pull from an OData feed, which is an open source mechanism to surface data connections. Things like Dynamic CRM, for instance, expose their data through an OData feed. Project Web app allows me to consume data through an OData feed. So a lot of the web services that are out there will have an OData connection at some capability that you can use Power Query to connect into. I can grab data directly from the Windows Azure Marketplace. By grabbing it from that Azure Marketplace, the big benefit is there may be data sources that I don't have access to that I need to pay some money for. In the past, I might not have known where I could consume that data. If I'm a small business, I have a limited amount of intelligence into the various data sources that are out there. By saying Microsoft Azure Marketplace, I can certainly sign in, purchase a particular component. Let's say that it's data for the top 25 organizations of advertisements in the US. I can buy that data. Once I've signed in, I can then download it. So all of that allows me to get access in an easier file. I'm going to skip over the Hadoop and HDInsight ones. Those are great ones if you have very large data sets. But even more mundane things like Active Directory or Exchange are here as potential data sources. Or even some things that are a little bit off the beaten path, like from Facebook. You can actually pull data in from Facebook to do some analysis on. So within the Power Query environment, I'm going to show off what happens if I do what's known as an online search. So this is a little bit different than doing a web search. A web search, I'm going to know the web page that I need to get the information from the beginning. In this case, I actually am going to start searching both public and private data sources. And in this case, I can go with, I'm going to look for some U.S. state temperature, if I can type, some U.S. state temperature extremes. It's been obviously a little bit cold recently, so I want to look and see some public data sources for that. And you can see right here, I've got a number of different sites that come up. When I hover over each of these sites, it shows me where the source is, So in this case, this is actually coming from data.gov. That's the EPA's public data source. I've also got the ability to pull it from specific areas like Wikipedia. So this is actually pulling it from Germany. And here I've got items within US itself. So one of the things that's critical to look about this is that it has the actual data source highlighted. I could load this into my document right now, but if you look at the types of data that are contained within sources like Wikipedia, typically you need to do some additional formatting to really light them up. So before I pull that in, I'm going to choose to edit this data, and it will actually fire up my query editor for the environment. So this is the Power Query Editor. It's very simple to go in here and make some easy changes. I can look at certain items within here and see what types of data that I have. I can see at a glance that some of this data is going to be difficult to map because it's not in a format that I would traditionally use. So for instance, here I've got record high temperature, and it has Fahrenheit and Celsius listed. Well, that's great, but if I try to map that or do any analysis of it, it's not going to be able to do it because it's all in one column. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually choose to split this column by a particular delimiter, in this case the slash character. And once I've done that, it will break that up into two different items, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this Celsius column. So as you can imagine, a lot of Excel business analysts spend a large number of hours during the day just doing this, just going through and choosing to clean up the data that they need to have access to. It's fairly repetitive. It's definitely not fun. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really make their job that much easier because they still have to go back and clean it up every single time that they're doing it. That's not fun. And it's something that certainly you don't want your team doing if you're running a small business. No one wants to spend 2 hours cleaning this up once a quarter. One of the big benefits of using Excel and Power Query is that, as you can notice, I've got a series of steps over here that are recording every single action that I'm taking. Those actions are codified in a manner that I can edit directly or that I could share with other people. So when I look at the types of data that I'm trying to clean up, I'm actually doing a series of set applied steps in a particular order. I can, if I want to, actually go in and look at what those steps are in what's known as the advanced editor. So I can actually see very easily what those steps are to be able to provide very detailed support for my individuals. And if I've got people in my organization who have already done a large amount of that cleanup, they can even go through and actually send me what those items are. So in this case, I've got just a limited amount of data, but I can come in here and actually paste in any sort of data that I want to and see what that looks like. And that'll go through and make a number of changes. So rather than me having to spend an hour or 2 hours cleaning it up, I've done this once. I can see very easily I've gone in here and made some additional changes to work with that. And that's beyond just simply doing data cleanup of a search and replace function. It's actually setting the type of data, so setting this actually to be a whole number type, going through and making sure that these are regular items. I'll show an example of what that looks like in a second when I close this out. Once I've closed that data source, it will bring that into Excel itself. And you'll see up here in the upper right-hand corner, I have the ability to pull that data back again. So let's imagine that a month down the road, Wikipedia changes their information. When I hover over this query, you can see at a glance, and here let me get rid of this, you'll see at a glance that it's giving me a preview for what's contained within that actual cleanup. So the first time that I loaded the data, it showed me what Wikipedia had said those columns and rows are supposed to look like. Now that I've applied all those transformations, it's actually showing me what it looks like in my scenario. So it shows record high and high temperature date rather than the names of the columns that Wikipedia had. When that data gets updated, this preview will update as well. And I can choose, if I want to simply refresh the data and pull it. So let's say that this week Alabama gets a new record low on the books. Someone goes into Wikipedia, they update that information. I'm instantly able to go in there, click refresh, and pull that information down into my sheet. So that can save potentially hundreds of hours if you're doing repeatable Excel tasks over and over again. And I can, as I mentioned earlier, always go to someone and choose to send them that information that's contained within this advanced editor. They can choose to even edit it within the screen themselves. So if I want to provide someone a quick information source, this includes all the transformations and the public data source that I pulled it from. It's just a text file. I could easily send this to anyone. Once I've got the data, I can start making changes to it. A good example of how a business analyst works is they'll typically clean up the data and import it in and then look at the data source as it pulls in. So here's a great example. I can see right off the top, I've got a couple of odd looking columns in here that say that the date times are negative or too large to display. At that point, I would probably flip back to the model to determine why those dates weren't showing up. In this case, it's because for those particular states or locations, the dates are so far back in time that Excel says, hey, you can't possibly mean something from 1880. And so I would need to actually put in some sort of placeholder to be able to surface that. Once I've got this information in my table, though, I can do whatever I want to. I can build a Power Query. I can build a Power Map. I can choose to do a pivot off of it. I'm going to actually show off what that Power Map instance looks like. So this data that I pulled is obviously geographical in nature. It's going to say, hey, where is the data that you're pulling from? And this is in a regular Power View item. It's a globe, but I can, if I want to, choose to flatten that globe. And it'll walk me through what I need to do to be able to get access to the information within it. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and grab the record low and throw it in here. And grab the record high and throw it in here. And you can see at a glance, I've got a nice visualization of where those data points are and which ones are good and which ones are bad. And you know, when you're looking through this, one of the things that I like to do when I have a visualization of this nature is to look for outliers. Because that's, after all, what business intelligence is all about. It's very easy to see, hey, some of these states have very modest negative temperatures. Some of them have very large highs. You know, if I were to look at this, I could see at a glance, hey, I've got some information with here. I can still layer on additional information. I could pull in, say, a 2D chart if I wanted to give me added contextual information for what I need to be able to say, okay, it's great that I can see it in 3D, but let me flip this by 2 dimensions as well. And maybe I'm going to flip this to see, you know, starting from highest temperatures to low. And I can scroll through this to see what that difference looks like. When I go through this, I can see at a glance, there's a couple of outliers here. There's one here that the record low is actually positive, which seems crazy until you actually scroll over here and realize that's Hawaii. Their record low is still above negative degrees in Hawaii. So perhaps that's the place that I need to be right now instead of Washington, D.C. Not every data source is going to track to a geographical area, but I would say if you're looking for ways to get additional oomph to your business, be considering data sources that aren't the traditional ones that you naturally have access to. Just because you have a lot of Excel worksheets right now doesn't mean that there isn't data living in some other database or some public data source that might be of equal or even more use to you than your current environment. So once I've got my data working the way that I want it to, the next question is how I actually surface that and share that with others. And that's where the Power BI Sites model really starts to take off. Because if I've done my homework and I've got a great visualization that I've shared here, or I've got a great Excel page that has some information for me to be able to bring up, I still want to be able to surface that to my team, and I want to be able to surface that to individuals inside my organization. So to do that, I'm going to go into the Power BI Sites, and I'm going to show off what that Power BI Sites experience looks like. Let's go ahead and bring this up real quick. So I've got an example here of a Power BI Sites workbook that's in place to be able to provide information for my team. So this is an example of a workbook that's running using the traditional Excel Online and the Excel web app. And you can see that down here that it says, hey, it's Excel web app. I can at any moment go through. I could have built this or spent some time building this as a business analyst. And then as a consumer of this content, I might be the CEO or the COO, or if I'm a small business, I might be both at the same time, just trying to run my business to be able to see what sorts of information are contained within here. The real big benefit of this is I can slice and dice this information without having to do a whole bunch of work on my side. So I can choose to filter this by particular areas without having to build up this capabilities myself. If I'm only interested in North America, it's very easy for me to see home appliances and then computers and then cameras would be where I'm getting the most bang for my buck. And I can see from a profit perspective that the U.S. is generating the most amount of profit in terms of total amount. But from an average size, it's actually averaging the same amount as Mexico or Canada. So it's probably just that I don't have as much presence in there. All of this information, all of these worksheets are surfaced within the top level Power BI site. So this is the site that I pulled that information from, containing all of the reports that I need, things like featured questions and documents that other members of the team have uploaded into the site. If I want to, for instance, I can use the natural language search to ask me particular information within the environment. So in this case, I'm searching some sales campaigns that I'm running for opportunities where we've actually closed and won the information. So that stuff is the sort of rich intelligence that I want to be able to generate out of the box without having to go to my team to pull up this information. So just because I've typed in this information, it's very easy for me. Again, this report didn't exist until I typed in that question a minute ago. It suggests what the language should look like. It's actually this SQL command here instead of what I typed. And I can see by the average days to close, it's got some rich information within here. Now this is a bar chart, and looking at the bar chart, I might conclude, hey, this is if I'm looking for the shortest one, well, this online one looks pretty short. When I flip this over to a clustered bar chart, I can actually see, oh, direct marketing is by far the shortest time to close within here. So the combination of those two sources, the ability to be using Excel to get insights and the ability of using Power BI sites to be able to light up your organization, combined, those two are the best solutions to ensuring that you're able to take advantage of all the work that Microsoft has done on their end to empower your business. I know we're close on time. Wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions in case anyone had them. Christine, have there been any questions?
I have not seen anything in the chat window, no.
Well, certainly I encourage everyone, if you're interested in kicking the tires on Power BI, the components for Excel are publicly available today. They're included in the cost of Excel. So if you've purchased Excel and you're not using Power Query and you're not using Power Map, I strongly urge you to reach out to us. We'll be happy to show you how to take advantage of that. And if you're interested in testing out the Power BI Sites capability to do natural language query, to surface reports and share them and collaborate with other members of your organization, we'd be happy to get you started on a trial of that as well. Well, Christine, thanks everyone for